The infantryman was the heart and soul of the Confederate Army. In fact, they were known for their bravery and courage on the battlefield. What was life like for the Confederate soldier? Let's take a look.
On April 12, 1861, the first shots in the American Civil War were fired on Fort Sumter. When the Confederate States of America declared war on the Union, many Confederate citizens rushed to join the military, hoping to defend their home state, as well as find adventure and win medals. However, once the men enlisted, they quickly found out that a soldier's life isn't exactly ideal.
When they first joined, a soldier was sent to a training base, such as Fort Jackson in South Carolina. They were given a training manual which told them just about everything that they needed to know. A soldier was issued a copy of Winfield Scott's Infantry Tactics, which began with a chapter called The School of the Soldier. While at a training base, soldiers learned to stand, salute, march, load and fire a rifle, and thrust a bayonet. They were also assigned to their own companies and trained along with them.
They also had to learn military discipline and law. Recruits were taught to obey orders without question, which included what to eat and where, what to do, and when and where to sleep. Volunteers would usually resent these restrictions. Even with precautions, both sides ended up severely lacking in discipline.
The most undisciplined unit on either side of the war was the Confederate cavalry. The cavalry was mostly comprised of Southern aristocrats who refused to recognize anyone as superior. There was a story in Stephen Starr's The Union Cavalry in the Civil War, where a newly appointed captain named French gives an order for no soldier to leave that camp without permission. The next morning, he met a soldier who had been out all night. He said, "Did you not hear my order last night?" And the answer was, "Yes, but I don't mind orders when I want to go anywhere."
Once they completed their training, companies were sent to actual war camps where they were to wait to be called to battle. To many, the camp seemed at first like a paradise. One recruit wrote,
"We arrived safely here yesterday evening. I am well and getting on finely. I never enjoyed better health in my life."
A typical day at the camp could be described as merely routine and drills. Each day, the soldiers had to get up at 5 to 6 a.m., depending on the season, to begin their daily drills. All soldiers had to show up or risk punishment. Obviously, drills were not a favorite part of the soldier's day. One soldier said,
"The first thing in the morning is drill, then drill, then drill, then drill again, then drill, 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 a little more drill, then drill, and lastly drill. Between drills, we drill and sometimes stop to eat a little and have roll call."
Sometimes the soldiers would get free periods in which they would entertain themselves by playing games such as races, baseball games, and occasionally snowball fights, as well as talking, writing, playing music or singing, or even gambling. Some soldiers even played pranks on each other, such as filling a bugle with water that would freeze overnight. Outside of drills and breaks, soldiers also had lists of daily chores. Many soldiers were assigned menial tasks such as chopping wood, guard duty, and feeding animals on site. By noon, the call for lunch would be signaled by bugles and drums playing roast beef.
All soldiers were given a set of rations for one day that they could easily cook themselves. Some soldiers grouped together into one tent to form their own mess hall. These messmates would cook and eat together. It was good for the soldiers because they were no longer alone during any eating time.
Besides meals, the soldiers' diet also included cornbread, coffee, or at least a coffee substitute made from peanuts, potatoes, peas, corn, or rye, and for many, tobacco and alcohol. Other than daily rations, soldiers were issued uniforms and other supplies. Upon arrival at camp, they were given pants, a white cotton shirt, drawers, socks, shoes, and a kepi, a type of flat hat. Although no specific uniform was really issued through the Confederate ranks, there was a uniform code that called for a short gray jacket and light blue trousers. However, the most simply wore gray pants.
Soldier branches were identified by an I, C, or A, infantry, cavalry, and artillery respectively, imprinted on their uniform since every Confederate soldier wore the same color uniforms. Unfortunately, like discipline, soldiers were often lacking in uniform code.
Following uniforms came weapons. Although many different rifles were used, the Springfield .58 caliber rifle musket was the most common. Other infantry weapons included a small Colt revolver or pistol, and a sword for higher-ranking officers. Along with weapons, soldiers were issued a lot of gear. This included knapsacks, blankets, wool, rubber to keep out rain, a leather cartridge box for up to 60 rounds of ammunition, a wing canteen, a haversack, and eating utensils, which included flatware, a cup, and a plate. All of this would add to 40 or 50 pounds on one soldier's back.
After a short while, the South began to experience shortages in supplies due to the massive blockade imposed by the Union. Shoes quickly wore out, resources diminished, and soldiers suffered. Often, soldiers had to resupply from fallen enemies, and sometimes even their own comrades.
Equipped and ready to go by dawn, soldiers approached battle with a confident attitude. In some cases, soldiers did not have to march far. Sometimes they would march for hours to get to the battlefield. During the battle, infantrymen formed two lines, a common formation. Typically, a very high-ranked officer would give a speech before battle. During the first stages of the war, the infantrymen would move as a large company. However, both sides soon found out that it would be more strategic to move in smaller groups due to heavy losses. Both sides would make a lot of noise when in battle, and this caused something known as battle deafness. One soldier even said that he could not hear his own rifle during battle. One of the major disadvantages of the war was that smokeless gunpowder has not been invented yet, which added to the confusion of the battle.
One of the worst possible things that you could do as a soldier would be to get wounded during a battle. It was nearly impossible to get to the field hospital before you died of a painful death. It wasn't until about halfway through the war that both sides established a medical corps to get soldiers off of the battlefield. Unfortunately, you were not that much better off in the field hospital. Field doctors did not have any materials to deal with the disinfection of wounds. Many times, for surgical procedures, including very common amputations, the same equipment was used on multiple patients.
For long-running battles by nightfall, fighting was discontinued. This did not necessarily mean that the battle was over. These nighttime breaks were for soldiers to eat, rest, and strategize. They would be up the next morning to continue the battle. Unfortunately, longer battles caused higher casualty rates. However, wounds were not the major cause of death. In fact, wound deaths were only a minority cause of death compared to none other than disease. Many Confederate soldiers had been isolated before the war and did not develop strong immunities to diseases such as smallpox, measles, and whooping cough. After battles, whatever was left of the soldiers would either return to their camps or keep pressing forward. In 1865, the American Civil War finally came to an end. A total of nearly 620,000 American soldiers died. About 258,000 were Confederates. Any surviving soldiers went back to their homes, which were often found destroyed. Some veterans suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome, while others became eternally disabled from injuries. Many Confederate veterans helped to form the United Confederate Veterans in 1889. Following the war, the reunited United States began its Reconstruction period as it left the bloody war behind. To this day, the Civil War that split up our nation ended up only to make it even stronger in the end.
Georgia Stories 3 is brought to you by the Georgia Public Broadcasting Corporation.